Hello, we'll give a couple of moments as people come in. Welcome to our Friday Live. We're excited to be here with everyone on this long weekend. I know so many of you are likely taking a bit of time to yourself, so we appreciate those of you who are showing up today. I have a guest with me today, Mariangelica. She is a certified mindset and business coach, educator, and international speaker. She helps CEOs and professionals drop the baggage and embody abundance and achieve life-changing breakthroughs. Mariangelica, thank you for being my guest today and for being here with us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a long weekend and I'm hoping that people are just, closing off laptops soon and just getting ready to start the weekend right. So I think this conversation falls at a really great time. Thanks for having me.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And now today we're going to be talking about mindset. And mindset is one of those things that I think we hear a lot about, but we don't necessarily always really understand what it means. And I know in our program in the Thought Leader Academy, we talk a lot about the thought leader mindset, which is very specific to communications and the way in which you show up in the world. And mindset is always about how we show up and the perspective that we have on who we are. But Mariangelica, you're a mindset coach. So I'd love to hear from you. How do you define mindset?
So I particularly define mindset as almost like what we say, somebody has an attitude. Mindset is like your mental attitude, right? So it's the way that you not only interpret the world and situations, but also how you then respond to them, because that is the balance of how we take on life. We interpret information that comes into our mind and into our brains a certain way, and then we respond to it. So a mindset is that mental attitude or the characteristics of how we interpret and respond to everyday life. That's the most simplest way of wrapping it up with a little bow.
How we interpret and how we respond to everyday life.
Yeah.
And so when we think about that, I love that definition because it's simple. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we really need, especially when it comes to mindset, because it can get quite complex. But how we interpret and how we respond. And so when we think about that, how do we know what our mindset is then? So like if it's interpretation and response, do I have a default? Is there a place that I come from a mindset perspective that shapes not only how I respond and interpret, but also how others respond and interpret me?
Yeah, I love that question, mostly because it starts to call upon like, what does my mindset look like? What does it really even present itself like in my life? And I've worked with people in varying industries, whether they're like career corporate climbers or they are in the candle making space or they're realtors, like all across the board. And what I have found is that depending on your industry, depending where you've been working for a long period of your life, you will probably have developed like a key way of describing your mindset if I were to ask you. And I've kind of narrowed it down to the four more positive ways, the positive types of mindset approach. And the first one, which we have connected a lot about, and I'm sure we'll talk about more, is a growth mindset, right? So someone who is willing to learn, more out there. There is opportunity. Everything is as an opportunity, right? There's so much more out there, and they're willing to allow themselves the belief that their mindset can change, can grow, can evolve. The other one is positive mindset. So that's someone who is highly optimistic, always looks and focuses on the positive. And I do want to say, like, these types of people, it's not about toxic positivity. It's not about ignoring all the bad that happens in your life. It's just around what we put focus on, right? We focus on the positive. So that positive mindset usually looks like practicing gratefulness and being more mindful, focusing on the positive things. And we find that positive builds on positive. And so if you're looking at things in a positive light, you'll see more positivity around you, right? The other one is an entrepreneurial mindset. And this is where a lot of professionals fall into. So when we talk about anyone in the corporate space or anyone who is an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship mindset doesn't just apply to entrepreneurs. usually someone who is, adaptable, ready for change, who is looking for opportunity, who is looking to, be innovative in the way that they solve a problem. And you find that a lot with people more in your space, people that are thinking about thought leadership. They usually have this kind of more, they're willing to go above and beyond to find solutions. They see things as opportunity, and they're more adaptable to change. And the last one is a challenge mindset. And that is where, hardships come our way. And most people usually have a reaction of looking at something as a threat or as a challenge. And a challenge is something that you can overcome, right? A threat is something that puts you, even your physiology changes, right? When we think about something being a threat. So I find that most, depending on what industry you're in, right? If you're in the meditation and in the, very spiritual side of life, then maybe you've developed a lot of like your positive mindset. You're practicing your gratefulness, you're doing all of these things, you're in this like light mode all the time. But the majority of people in, that are in the career space or are growing maybe into thought leadership will fall in, likely will grow their entrepreneurial mindset or their challenge mindset. But it's kind of that approach of, which one of those do I really want to fall into, and how do I grow all four in like an even way? So when you talk about default, like that is something that if we've never been taught anything to do with mindset, we just absorb things that have been told to us, maybe from childhood, maybe from our parents, maybe from mentors we've had growing up. And then we adopt these beliefs and turn them into the way that we operate in our mindset. And I've talked about positive ones, but there are negative, kind of more, harmful or more difficult mindset approaches. And that might be where some people lie.
It's interesting as you're talking, the four that you've come up, you've just described: growth, positive, entrepreneurial, and challenge. And, when I look at those four, I think, if I were to put these on an XY axis, I can imagine that, they would probably, one of the axes would be something in the area of emotional intelligence or something around emotions. And then the other one would be something around confidence or knowledge-based confidence, something in those areas. And, it's very similar to what we talk about when we are talking about the thought leader mindset. And we have four categories. And as I was listening to yours, I'm like, I wonder how they align. We talk about the expert, the change maker, the connector, and the thought leader. The expert being the rational confidence and knowledge, but less associated to emotions and emotional influence. The change maker, highly associated to emotional influence, and likely just as smart or just as knowledgeable as the expert, but choosing not to spend time in that area for fear of maybe being found out, that imposter syndrome. The connector sort of being less confident in either of those places, and really is deeply into, that imposter of being found out, of not wanting to be seen or heard. And then finally, the thought leader, where it's the balance between the two. Now, as you hear that, and as you think about, the growth, positive, entrepreneurial, and challenge, I would think that growth would probably be aligned to that thought leader, and then, I'm not sure where the other ones live, but as you hear that, I'm curious, what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, like the thought leadership mindset, and we've talked about this like offline and in different conversations, is truly kind of that embodiment of, to me, it's actually a little bit of all four, right? It's someone who is willing to adapt and change, right, and grow, but then who also starts to see opportunity, because when you innovate and you're in that growth mentality, you're like, okay, this might be an opportunity for change. This might be an opportunity for learning or growth. This might be an opportunity for connection. So I feel like that's the most balanced one, which I think is why when we talk about all these four and your four, they almost like kind of all correlate to its growth and thought leadership.
Yeah.
I think that's where that correlation really happens.
The one we haven't talked about, I guess, in either of us, but I think it's the one that is probably the most challenging, is the fixed mindset.
Yes.
Right. And the fixed mindset is, where we are living within a box and choosing not to see that there's options outside of that. And I think it's the place where some of us just find ourselves without even knowing that we're there. How does a person who maybe is in that place of a fixed mindset start to even recognize they're there?
Yeah.
And then once they recognize it, how do they move through it?
Beautiful. I love this segue, because the next part after we look at mindset, it's almost like what lives below it, which are the actions, the thoughts, the likely limiting beliefs that are coming up, and each one of them will have a different type of them. And so when we talk about fixed mindset, it's almost also like it's either fixed or it's what I call people that are unaware, just unaware of their mindset altogether. And so you've been operating on what I speak to as a programming, right? An underlying kind of database or programming or iOS or, software thing on your computer, and you haven't done an update in a long time. And that's the way that I've found, like, it's kind of a more visual guide of, okay, so I've been operating on this default and life has been having all these different things and changes have been coming up and I am still here. So I say, no, my operating system does not do that. I don't do that, or I don't have that application. Well, it's because we haven't done an upgrade. We haven't done an update to our mental mindset. And so if we can't do that, then of course we can't deal with the new challenge or deal with the new change in life or understand what's happening to the world with AI. We're fixed over here saying, no, I don't do that. I don't mess with that. I don't know what that is. Therefore, like, I'm stuck, or I cannot grow, or I'm not enough for this new challenge, right? Because we haven't done that update. Like, sitting there waiting for us, but we haven't done it. So some of the ways, right, is to start thinking and becoming aware of our thoughts, of the things that we say to ourselves day to day. And then also to work potentially with someone to understand what has been said to me about me. And those are the types of thoughts that we never question, because usually they've come, like I said, from childhood, and they've come from a place of authority. And these people supposedly know us better, right? And this belief that your mentor knows you better, your parent knows you better. And so when they say something about you to you, you take that in at face value and you're like, okay, that must be true. And we sometimes, especially in this fixed mindset, have never dared question where that comes from and why that was said to us. So that's part of the exploration and, almost like the mental work that has to happen to start to kind of shift out of that mindset.
I think it's really interesting. And before we dive into it, because there's a couple of questions I have, I want to also just acknowledge all of you who are joining us here live, and to ask you that if you have any questions, go ahead, drop them into the chat. We'll make sure to address them as we go along. So please don't be shy. We're talking about some pretty deep stuff, and we'd love to get some questions from our audience. Mariangelica, as you were talking, about sort of these stories that we're telling ourselves, what are the things that we're telling ourselves? And as storytellers, we know, and I say this all the time, the stories we tell ourselves today is the future that we create for ourselves tomorrow. We're always creating our future through what we're telling ourselves. And in our program, we talk a lot about limiting beliefs, because, as we move through these quadrants or through these aspects of mindset, whether we're coming from a fixed mindset into a growth mindset, or whether we're moving from, the expert into the thought leader mindset, it's all about the stories we're telling ourselves. And often what I find is that we're not even really aware. There's scripts that go on in our brain all the time, and it's so noisy in our brains sometimes we're not hearing what is really being said. So surfacing some of those thoughts is tough. How do you go about that?
Beautiful question. What I coach with and what I start people with is actually keeping a log in their phone, on their notes, or on a notebook if they're pen and paper like me, and to start thinking only about when they say any absolutes. So when they say I never or I always, and this is, or usually the other one I kind of add, if they're willing to go there, is the I am, but that doesn't always come up as daily in conversation. Like, I always forget my keys. I am so forgetful. I always forget my keys. I never know where I put my things. Again, I, as a coach, always look for, even when someone's talking to me, I look for those absolutes, right? Because that means that has been there for so long that you believe it to be absolutely true, that therefore it can never change. Absolutes are absolutes forever, right? So when we say, I always forget my keys, I never remember anything, right? We don't mean that truthfully, right? We know that we find our keys every now and then, right? Like, that's not actually true. But when we speak in absolutes, that's what I want people to start catching. If they live with someone that they're comfortable sharing this with, I always say, talk to your partner and tell them that you want to be called out when you say an absolute, so that you can note it and then you can bring it back to the next session and we can discuss, because those absolutes start to tell me a story of, okay, now I know my line of questioning. Now I know that if you're telling me you always forget your keys or I never remember anything, okay, why is that true? And who told you this about yourself? Like, when did you decide this? Because a limiting belief to me is also what I call a limiting decision, because beliefs were decisions that we made and then decided to believe, right? And so I always forget my keys means at some point in your life, you decided that you were forgetful. And it might have been a very specific moment where you forgot something really crucial, like something that really mattered. And it wasn't your keys. It was like the rings to your wedding, or like something really major that you were like, yeah, wow, I am the worst. I forget everything. So that's kind of how I encourage people to start, is to just start with that level, because that makes it really simple. It's like, okay, whenever I say always or never or another absolute, there's something going on there and I got to explore it, because then that leads to different actions that then you might not want to take because you believe yourself to be forgetful and, you can't remember anything.
Yeah, when we talk about it as well, so it's a similar thing where we're surfacing that limiting belief. How do you find it? And when you've surfaced it, because I know that some of that work, and for anyone who's joining us live here, we do have some giveaways. So anyone who's interested in working through some of their mindset issues, or actually moving into a place of creating the life they want, we've got some great tools. And make sure that you click on the link, I think that we've put into the chat, and you can sign up for our workbook on limiting beliefs, and a guide from Mariangelica on manifesting and affirmation prompts for July. So we'll come back to that at the end and tell you a little bit more about that. But in our little workbook, what we do is we talk about surfacing them. And I think the absolutes, I love that, because that actually gives a really great place, a starting point of being able to go, what is it I'm telling myself that maybe isn't true, or maybe isn't helpful? Because both of those things are important to recognize. And once we've surfaced them, then there's a process of saying to yourself, is it true and is it helpful? Right? Because like, even if it's true, like maybe I do forget my keys a lot, maybe that's true. Okay, but if I keep saying that, is it helpful to keep saying that? And it's not. I mean, to your point, when we tell ourselves that, we're just going to keep being forgetful. And maybe that I'm forgetting my keys because I keep telling myself I'm forgetting my keys. And so learning how to work through some of these limiting beliefs is incredibly powerful. So when you're working with a client, what is that, what's the process that you're taking around helping them to find the mindset, or to, because if there are mindsets that we have a choice of, how do they choose the mindset they want?
Right. So when you're talking about what you were just saying about the keys, I think one of the biggest things that I work with people is the belief that their mindset can change. Okay. So when they say I forget my keys, and they don't just say I forget, I always forget my keys.
Mm-hmm.
I look for the absolute, because not only, like you said, yes, sometimes the only reason they're saying that is because they forget it, right? And it comes up again every time they forget their keys. But the belief that can change is the biggest shift that has to happen for you to even believe that your mindset could change to something better, or to something else, or to something that's more helpful for you. So I first work with having to get people to really believe that change can happen. That's the first groundwork, because there's no point in me introducing new ideas and new ways of thinking if you believe deep down, right, in your subconscious, in your programming, that you are not going to ever be able to remember where you put your things. Maybe there's just no strategies. Maybe there are, different things we can tell ourselves. Maybe there's a new routine we can get into place. There are things that we can help to change it. But if we don't get that belief first, then we cannot continue to build on that work, right? So that's the very first thing I work through. And then it's actually about really going deep into the stories of how that came to be true in your life. And so I do a lot of, well, I do a lot of childhood work with people, right? And we talk a lot about their inner child and the person that they were when they were a child and when these things came up for them. And that is usually where a lot of my work starts. And it's really deep, really fast. It's, it's not easy. Tissues are always involved,
Yeah.
but it is a really important place to start because, again, usually by age 7, we've made a lot of decisions about the way we're going to be. Right. There's many studies to prove around what's at age 7, we've made decisions around who we are and who we're not. And that has come from usually at 7, what has been fed to us from authority figures, mentors, teachers, all of that. Right. So we start to explore what those stories are, and then we work on actually rewriting them. Right. So the rewriting them serve us today.
So the person we were at 7 and the decisions we made at 7, we're not saddled with for the rest of our lives, right? We have choice. Yeah. And it's, I like to think of this almost as a reframing, of like, because things that were true of us at 7 clearly do change. And so when they change, we also need to gain a new view of ourselves. And so we have to reframe that view. So as in the example you've been using, I always forget my keys. What's the reframe? Who's the person who doesn't forget their keys? What does that person look like? What are they like? What do they say? Do they say, I bring my keys with me everywhere? Or do they say, I have a place for everything? Because I think sometimes just even having a new script can be helpful, right? Because it starts that reframing process. Is that something that you use a little bit of?
Yes, exactly. So in the reframing and in the rewriting, right, we are coming up with a new identity, because that's at the end of the day what we're changing deep down. I am not a person that forgets their keys. Like, this is just not me anymore. What serves me now? Like, what is going to be helpful for me to, in thought leadership, step on a stage and remember my entire talk? Like, what's going to serve me when I step in front of my colleagues and do a presentation, right? Oh, is it that I'm going to forget my facts? Is it that I'm going to, like, there are so many things that it is hindering us from. So in that rewriting, and I mentioned I work with a lot of inner child work, then I work with the opposite too, which is the future you, right? And so I like to think of everyone being present at the same time, right? And so when I embrace, a challenge, or when I coach my people to embrace a challenge, it's usually like, what thoughts is your inner child or that 7-year-old you trying to bring up for you? And usually they're there to protect you, right? So the forgetful thing is, if you're going to be forgetful because you've forgotten things in the past, maybe let's just not go in front of an audience and speak, because that's going to be really scary. If you forget something, it's really going to be really embarrassing. And these like emotions come up. And then what does the future you that has the changed identity, the new story, the new narrative, what are they saying about that? They're like, I step on stage easily and effortlessly because I know my world, my industry, my skill, whatever it is that they're talking about. And that person is not even thinking about forgetting things. They're thinking about the value, the impact of what they're bringing out. I step on stage and I speak confidently because I know what I'm talking about, and it is important for me to share it. So in that change and that narrative change comes like a really beautiful new becoming of that individual. And it's a really beautiful transformation, but it does require some like deep work, right? This doesn't change by you just saying some affirmations in your mirror like 2 days a week. Like that is not going to happen.
Well, I think, the future you, I think, is a really, really powerful tool because, we know and we forget, but we know that at some point we're going to be in the future that we're imagining. And I think what's powerful about that is making the decisions today that help the future you. So why can that future you say, I walk on stage effortlessly, or I remember everything with ease and joy? Why? Because you're doing the work today. You're preparing your future self to be able to say that. And I think there's something really powerful in helping ourselves to understand that the power of the now, we hear about this all the time, be in the now. But what does that really mean? Well, what it really means is that right now, what I'm doing, what I'm learning, what I'm doing, how I'm showing up is actually preparing the future me to be different. And every choice I'm making today is changing the future me. And so that's incredible. We have that power in our hands, and our mindset is exactly that. So when somebody chooses to work with a mindset coach today, they're actually giving a gift to their future self, because that future self is not going to be continuing to say, I always forget my keys, and I think that that's the power of really spending the time and the energy on equipping ourselves today for what actually will be coming at us tomorrow, because we all want to grow. And I think, no one wakes up in the morning, at least I don't think so, going, gee, I wish I was, smaller and less successful. I think we all wake up hoping that we're growing in some way.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, we sometimes need help. And I think the work that you're doing, Mariangelica, is exactly the kind of work that is really, really powerful for people in the world. So I'm just looking at the time. We've got about 4 minutes left. So what else would you like to share from a mindset perspective that you think the audience could really benefit from?
I think one of the things that I love like leaving people with is it's actually an exercise. It's to become more aware of what mindset, you're maybe in. And if that becomes difficult, you're like, I don't know what mindset I'm in, then just start to become more aware of your thoughts. I think at the end of the day, that is what's really going to shape what mindset you kind of fall into or which one you're growing or developing. And inadvertently, if you don't pay attention to it, or it's just, not in your awareness, you might be growing a mindset of guilt, or you might be growing a mindset of shame or blame. And these can be really harmful in the future. So if we don't become aware of them, we might actually be feeding and literally propping coins and effort and energy into something that we don't want to grow into. And so becoming
Right.
aware of your mindset is actually the first level of everything, because we run on autopilot. A lot of us have like a million things happening into our everyday lives. And so we fall into a routine and a pattern, and that's just how we do. But if we just start to, whether it's document, whether it's journal, whether it's put it on your phone, like literally, like one of the things that I sometimes tell people that say they're super busy is just pick two emojis, right? Happy emoji and the sad emoji. And at the end of the day, just in your notes, put like a little sad emoji or a happy emoji based on how you feel like your thoughts were that day, if you want to keep it super basic and simplistic. And then after the month, look at that array of little happy faces or sad faces. Maybe that's going to be like, oh, okay, maybe I should look into this.
Yeah.
Whatever feels like it fits into your life is where I want you to start. And that's where I want you to start to become more aware of what's happening, what thoughts you're having in your mind day after day.
So I know that our listeners are all sharing stories in the chat, which is amazing. Thank you, audience, for sharing those stories. And we're almost out of time, and I want to kind of wrap it up with a couple of things. First of all, what you just said, Mariangelica, is really important, which is surface them, become aware of where your mindset is. And I think I'd add to it to say, not just the emotions, but also become aware of the script, the track that's running in your mind. I think that for so many of us, it's become so we're so used to what's going on in our brain all the time, we don't hear it anymore. But I want each of you to start thinking about what are the things that you're telling yourself. And as you're putting the happy emoji or the angry emoji or the sad emoji or whatever the emoji is you're using, maybe put down beside it anything that you're hearing yourself say. And just don't judge it, just write it down. And I think it might be quite enlightening at the end of that week or the end of that month to look back at what are those thoughts and how are they changing, because that's how we start to recognize mindset, is by becoming aware of where we are. And as that happens, then we can do something about it, because without awareness, to your point, we cannot do anything. The awareness is the starting point. This has been really, really powerful, Mariangelica. Thank you so much. How can our listeners keep in touch with you?
Thank you for this time and this conversation. Like, I don't know where half an hour went.
I know. It's so
like,
fast.
did we not just talk for 5 minutes? But you can, I live often on Instagram, or you can follow me here on LinkedIn. Instagram is honest.ceo. And the affirmation and manifestation calendar for July is going to be included with the goodies that you're providing your people. And this is a prompt calendar that I offer on the first of every month. And with that, it's just some ideas, some thoughts to be putting into your head, some affirmations to maybe start saying to yourself a couple of times a day and for that day, and just play around with those prompts. And I send a new one on the first of every month. And you can find the rest of them on the first of every month in your inbox at honest ceo.co/calendar.
Amazing. And, that is a really valuable resource. I think for most people, they probably put it as a background on their desktop, just so you
Yeah,
remember.
look at it every day. It's there.
Yeah,
You
look
don't
at it
think about
every
it.
day. And it's a powerful thing. And we're also giving you, for anyone who is interested, the tool that we use in the Thought Leader Academy, that is all about surfacing your limiting beliefs. And it's a little tool that will help you. There's some prompts in there about your inner scripts, and it gives you a little process of surfacing, assessing, reframing, and repeating that action. So it's a great tool. And I think along with the prompts, it would be really helpful. The two, I think, work really, really beautifully together. Well, thank you again, Mariangelica. This has been really, really incredible. And for all of our guests, thank you for joining us on this, the last day of the week on a long weekend. I'm sure that you're all ready to have some time to enjoy. So thank you. And we'll talk in a couple of weeks where we'll be getting together to talk about how to land that six-figure job. So watch for that. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye. Thanks.